Over the last 50 years or so, there has been an extraordinary renaissance of Christian philosophy in the Anglo-American world. And one of the manifestations of this renaissance has been a revival of natural theology in our day. That is to say, arguments for the existence of God. One of the fruit of this revival of natural theology is the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, published by Blackwell's in Oxford. And this book includes 11 detailed, lengthy, I think indispensable expositions of the classic arguments for God's existence, and is just one of the indications of the sort of renaissance that is going on in our day among contemporary philosophers with respect to the defense of arguments for God's existence. I described something of this renaissance in an article for Christianity Today a couple years ago, and it was interesting to see the reactions in the blogosphere to this cover story. Along with expressions of appreciation, there were comments like the following: Dawkins' The God Delusion soundly deals with these arguments. Did you even do any research? Or again, have you even read Dawkins' '(S) book? He answers every one of those arguments quite well. Or this comment: I was dismayed that Dr. Craig has used these arguments to defend the existence of God. As someone mentioned before, has he even read Dawkins' book? Now, it is the merit of the God Delusion that it does engage seriously with the classic arguments for God's existence. The writings of the new atheists in general do not typically even engage with theistic arguments, and at least Dawkins makes an attempt to do that. But what's remarkable, I think, about these comments is the degree of confidence placed in Richard Dawkins' supposed refutation of the arguments for God's existence. Are they right? Has Dawkins really dealt the death blow to these theistic arguments? Well, this morning I'd like to look at those arguments and see what Dawkins has to say about each one. Now, since my time is limited this morning, I can only consider the arguments that Dawkins himself raises. Doubtless you can think of other objections to these arguments, and that's good. It means you're thinking for yourself. But for a fuller treatment, I would recommend either my book, Reasonable Faith, or the Blackwell Companion. We have a PowerPoint to help us, so let's bring up the first slide, which is on the cosmological argument. Now, Dawkins doesn't even mention the primary form of the cosmological argument, which I presented, namely the argument from contingency. This is itself a remarkable oversight because this is the most famous version of the cosmological argument that has been defended. So obviously it cannot be the case that Dawkins has refuted all of the arguments that I mentioned, since he doesn't even deal with the first form of the cosmological argument. But he does discuss a different type of the cosmological argument, which can be formulated as follows. Number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Two, the universe began to exist. Three, therefore the universe has a cause. And once we reach the conclusion that the universe has a transcendent cause, then we can analyze what sort of properties such a cause must have. Now, premise one of this argument seems obviously true, I think. It's at least more plausible than it's contradictory or negation. To suggest that things could just pop into existence uncaused out of nothing is to quit doing serious philosophy and to appeal to magic. Premise two can be supported by both philosophical argument and scientific evidence. The philosophical arguments aim to show that there cannot have been an infinite regress of past events, or in other words, that the series of past events must have had a beginning. Now, these philosophical arguments for the finitude of the past are mind-expanding and very fascinating, but we needn't consider them this morning since Dawkins doesn't object to any of these arguments. As for the scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe, this is based upon the expansion of the universe. We now have pretty strong evidence that the universe is not eternal in the past, but had an absolute beginning a finite time ago. In 2003, Arvin Bord, Alexander Vilenkin, and Alan Guth were able to prove that any universe, which is on average in a state of cosmic expansion, cannot be infinite in the past, but must have had a past space-time boundary. Even if our universe is just a tiny part of a so-called multiverse of many universes, their theorem requires that the multiverse itself must have had an absolute beginning. Now, of course, highly speculative scenarios, such as loop quantum gravity scenarios, string models, even closed time-like curves have been proposed to try to avoid this absolute beginning. These models are not merely fraught with problems, but the bottom line is that these theories, even if true, do not succeed in restoring an eternal past. At the very most, they just push the beginning back one step. Vilenkin pulls no punches. He says, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning." End quote. Now, it follows from the two premises that the universe has a cause. Well, what properties must such a cause of the universe possess? Well, by the very nature of the case, as the cause of space and time, this entity must transcend space and time, and therefore exist timelessly and non-spatially, at least without the universe. This transcendent cause must therefore be changeless and immaterial, since anything that is timeless must be unchanging, and anything that is changeless must be non-physical and immaterial, since material things are always changing on the molecular and atomic level, at least. Such a cause must be beginningless and uncaused, at least in the sense of lacking any prior causal condition, since there cannot be an infinite regress of causes. Occam's razor, which is the principle that says we should not multiply causes beyond necessity, will shave away any further causes, since one cause is required to explain the effect. This entity must be unimaginably powerful, if not omnipotent, since it created the universe without any material cause. Finally, and most remarkably, such a transcendent first cause is plausibly personal. Two reasons can be given for this conclusion. First, the personhood of the first cause is implied by its immateriality and timelessness. The only entities which could possibly possess such properties are either unembodied minds or else abstract objects like numbers. But you see, abstract objects don't stand in causal relations. The number 7, for example, can't cause anything. And therefore it follows logically that the transcendent cause of the origin of the universe is plausibly an unembodied mind.